Hello, today we're going to be continuing on our tong making journey, and I'm going to be making a pair of hollow bit tongs. In the past I've preferred bolt jaw tongs to hollow bit tongs, and that's because you can have something on the end of the bar that you're forging, say an animal head or whatever, that can be sort of in the gap in between the jaws and the actual boss on a pair of bolt jaw tongs, whereas hollow bit tongs, we don't have that. You just have a cylindrical hole or V-bit hole where you then put the bar in, and so maybe there's less applications that we can use this in, but at the same time I think it's going to be a stronger or a more secure pair of tongs when we're forging on a bit of bar. So let's get straight into this video. So this is one half of the hollow bit tongs, and you can see that I've gone for a U shape in the actual jaws, and so this is going to be for 12mm round bar. And I was thinking, obviously you can do a V-bit, and that means that you can hold both square and round bar, but I want to make this pair to hold short lengths of 12mm round bar to then make animal heads out of for bottle openers and things like that. And so I want it to really securely hold 12mm round bar, and I was thinking, surely the more surface area that we're going to have on the bar means a better grip on the bar that we're going to be putting in the tongs, and so we're going to get more surface area contact with a U shape than we are going to with a square shape or a V-bit in our tongs. However, it does then mean, of course, we can only hold round bar in this pair of tongs, but I think I want to sacrifice that to see if it is going to be a better or more securely holding pair of tongs on 12mm round bar. So one downside to hollow bit tongs, or that's what I would call this pair of tongs, is that you can't have anything on the end of your stock bar, as it's going to be up against the front side of your boss. So you can't have like a scroll or an animal head or any sort of feature like that, as it's going to be butting up against here. But for this pair of tongs it's okay, as I'm making this in mind of just holding shorter lengths, which I forge an animal head on the end and then cut the head off and make it into a bottle opener or something. So it doesn't particularly matter, and I'm hoping that this is going to hold something more securely than, say, a pair of bolt jaw tongs, which would only have a small section of bar, so a smaller surface area of the bar in the jaws compared to a hollow bit. So I've got a piece of 16mm square bar heating up in the fire. As usual, we're going to be using that to forge out this tong. This half of this tong is exactly the same on this pair, two identical halves, and I'm going to come on the near edge of the anvil for the first isolation to get this material isolated, and I'm going to come to 1.25 inches is how much material I'm laying off for this first isolation. And I want to sort of get it all roughed in the first heat, so if we get the first isolation in, the coming over at the 45 and then the back side of the boss. So it's all very rough and chunky, but I like to do that to leave a lot of material and just get those isolations there all in, so we can sort of begin to section off the material. Now we can come back and refine it all and make it all nice and neat. Our bolster, or boss, sorry, is a little bit too long at the moment, so I want to come, make it shorter and wider. It'll be just a bit of a better hinge, a hinge plate you often call it on a pair of tongs. As usual, notice the angle. We've got a sort of 5 degree to the anvil face, and that's so we don't forge hole shuts, or folds, which could then become cracks, and our boss or the tongs would break at the boss. This is one of the reasons why we keep a lot of mass in the boss. We just rough it in at the start, as during all of these forging operations we often come back here and planish the material, so we are thinning it down as we're flattening off where these local upsets are on the boss. And so thinning that material down, so by leaving a little bit extra material in there at the start, we're not going to have a really thin boss at the end. Trying to get the bosses to match. So I want to briefly go over some rules or good tips when taking measurements for bending steel. So we have to work out the width of material that we need here to then bend into the correct amount of steel for the jaws to fit 12mm round bar. So there's a bit of maths, but if we just do pi d for the bar which we're going to have in here, which is 12mm round bar, so 12 times, let's say pi is 3, 12 times 3 is going to give us 36. The tong is of course only holding half of the round bar, so 36 divided by 2 is 18. So that would tell us that we need 18mm width of material. However, that isn't necessarily correct, as the inside edges is going to compress and the outside edge is going to stretch. So if we actually only took 18mm of material, we wouldn't cover the half of the round bar, so we would be slightly under. You can sort of see the effect on this tong half, as there is a slight angle on the edges of the bar, so you can see that the inside has compressed and the outside stretched. And so I did only take 18mm of material for this, which is what we're going to be taking for this bar. So if we actually wanted to go halfway around the bar, what we needed to do was take a measurement from the middle of this material. So let's say that this material is 4mm thick, we would have to take a measurement from the middle of this bar. But of course that's then adding on an extra 2mm either side, so 4mm to the diameter of the bar that this radius would sit on. And so we would actually be working out how much material we would need for a rod that has a diameter of 16mm. So we would actually be needing to do 16mm times by pi d, using 3 as pi, so that would be 48 divided by 2 to get half the measurement for one half of the reins, which would then be 24mm. So that would tell us that we would need to take 24mm for the width of this material if we wanted to go a full halfway around a 12mm round bar. However, we don't want to go all the way halfway around a 12mm bar, as if we do that, we run the risk of these two halves of the tongs touching when we close them, and therefore if they touched, we wouldn't actually be holding the bit of bar in between the two halves, because all the pressure is being lost on the two halves touching. So we want a little gap between the two, and so that's why I've chosen 18mm for the width of this bar. So I hope that that has made sense. I'm probably going to do a video on it in the future to really go into more depth on why you need to measure from the middle of the bar and not from, the bottom or the top, because they both get stretched and distorted. So we've got to work this material down to 18mm wide, and then it's roughly about 4mm thick. So to sink the end, I'm coming onto the swage block, just because we've got all of these different swages, so we can use these to sink it in to get the perfect diameter on the inside. What you could do is make up a little hardy swage to go in your hardy hole of the anvil, or if you don't want to make one of these, you can try and do it on the step of the anvil. It's not going to be as good as using a swage block or one of these, but it'll work. It just might not be the best inside or neat diameter perfect circle. So we'll come on to the swage block. I'll use a cross peen to get it set, and then actually force it in with a 12mm round bar. Also, you'll notice that the transition actually begins on top of the boss, and so to get that transition beginning to flow into the rest of the jaw, I'll actually hit the top corner of the boss as well in whichever swage we go into. I think it'll be this one to start, and then we'll move on to this one. We have the jaws all set and finished as much as they can be for now until we actually rivet them together. We've got the reins to draw out, which is the next thing that I'm going to do, but I'm going to do it off camera as I've filmed this lots of times over this tong making series. So I'm going to leave it off this video, but you can see the form that I do on the reins on this pair. I leave the first 4 to 5 inches nice and square or rectangular, then draw it down square, octagon, round on a taper, and then flatten off 2 sides, so we end up with an oval, which is going to be a strong shape and a nice comfortable shape. So I'll do this now, obviously off camera so you won't see it. The next thing you'll see is us riveting them together. On to riveting. I'm just using a piece of 8mm rod so I can get it into this hole. There we go. Get it set, flip it over, knock it through. A little bit more. You can see we've got one end much longer than the other, but that's okay. We can, as with the pair of box jaw tongs, I left that until the end so that I know that they're both going to be exactly the same length when I trim the edges off. Otherwise you can, run the risk of not getting them the same length if you cut it short before you rivet the pair together. I also like to come and finish the heads, the rivet heads, at a much lower temperature, so we're at a black heat, and if you just do a couple of hits on either side and then rotate, you can retain a nice dome head without creating a flat spot on the rivet head that's on the anvil face. As if it's on the anvil face and you're just hammering here, it's obviously going to flatten that dome. So if we just do a couple of hits and turn, you can retain a nice round end on both of your rivets. I think now I'll get the 12mm rod into there and we can tap the jaws closed in the swage block. Thank you for watching the video. I'm really happy with how this pair of hollow bit tongs have turned out. Maybe it should be a V-bit rather than a U-bit, but I want to try this out and see if the increased surface area contact on the inside of the jaws or onto the bar that the jaws are going to hold. I'm hoping that that is going to create a more sturdy tong, a more secure grip on the bar that we're forging on. The bit of maths that I did might have gone over your head. I don't know if I explained it very well. I want to do another video on this to really explain, I can do a couple of practical pieces to explain the theory and show how steel is compressed on the inside of a bend, stretched on the outside of a bend, and then you want to be taking your measurement from the middle of the bar or the middle of the bend, and that will give you the true measurement of what the circumference of the bend actually is. We're nearly at the end of this tong making series, and after that I've got an idea for another big project, which is probably going to be a couple of parts to that project, but I'm excited for that one. I'm not going to reveal what it is just yet. I want to get the tong making videos out of the way, and then I can focus on this new exciting project, which I hope you're going to like. I'm most definitely going to like making it, so hopefully you guys are going to like watching me make it and then seeing the final piece. Anyway, thank you for watching the video. I'll see you soon.